Hello, my name is Manajay Beatty, and I am an associate professor at Cal State San Bernardino, and I also am a psychologist. I've been seeing clients for 10 years now. I'm a licensed psychologist in the state of California, and one of my specialties is clients that practice ethical non-monogamy, and I'm excited to speak to you today about this topic. So welcome to my presentation. So some of the objectives we're going to cover are some key terms that are important to lay the framework for our discussion. We're going to talk about the small amount of research that has been done in relation to this topic. Not a lot, but we will cover the amount of research that has been done. We're going to talk about also what are some benefits of ethical non-monogamy to a person, as well as what are some benefits to one's relationship from practicing ethical non-monogamy. And then we're going to conclude by talking about some resources that could be helpful in understanding this topic more, because definitely 15 minutes is not a lot to cover this very complex topic. There's whole books written on polyamory and ethical non-monogamy, and so yeah, but I'll try to give you an overview essentially of the important aspects of ethical non-monogamy. So I would like to pause for a moment to have you do a reflection. I want you to really think about what are some of the images that you associate with non-monogamy? Or what are some of the messages you've heard about non-monogamy? So in answering this question, I want you to think about if there's been something outside of monogamy in, let's say, the movies you've seen, maybe songs you've listened to, maybe books you've read. What messages did those things give to you about non-monogamy? So I want to, if you don't mind, pausing for a moment and just thinking about that question. So hopefully you've had a chance to think about this reflection that I've asked you to do. And maybe some things to consider is, did you, those images that you've seen of non-monogamy, was it consensual? Because often when you see those portrayals, it's not consensual, like someone's cheating. So often the most common portrayal of non-monogamy is cheating, which is not ethical and it's not consensual. Was there communication about it? So in the cases where you can think of non-monogamy, did they actually talk about it, or was it just kind of done or like understood? Was there communication about it? So, so thank you for engaging in that reflection. So that leads to the next point about monogamy is seen as the default in our society. So monogamy is seen as that's just what you're supposed to do. That's just the norm. That's just what you're supposed to do. If you think about, there's not really any other options presented. People talk about finding like the one and, your soulmate. It's not your soulmates. It's usually that one person, right? That kind of completes you. So monogamy is really the default in our society. And in a lot of societies around the world, monogamy is considered the default. It's also the ideal relationship model. So not only is it the default model that, okay, this is what you're expected to do, but it's also what is the best thing you could do. That's what you're supposed to strive for. That's success in a relationship, is having this monogamous partner, and it's best if you are together for life. And so that's seen as like the ultimate ideal relationship model. And you even see this bias that our society has. You even see it in scientific studies. If you think about maybe studies that you've done where you've done like online studies, if they ask you about your relationship status, it's often going to be something like, oh, are you single? Are you partnered? Are you, married? It's going to be like asking stuff about being monogamous or not. Generally, you're not going to be asked, are you in an ethical non-monogamous relationship? Are you in multiple relationships? So scientifically, we don't really track non-monogamy, ethical non-monogamy. So this is like a huge bias that exists in the field and exists in psychology that, has done all these different studies on all these wonderful topics, but something that we're not really tracking is ethical non-monogamy. And I wanted to talk about some important terms and concepts. So in terms of just terms, what I'm going to be talking about today is what's called ethical non-monogamy, and also known as consensual non-monogamy. So those are interchangeable terms. And basically what that means is that the people that are involved in that situation they have agreed to have multiple relationships. So either emotional relationships, romantic, sexual relationships with other people. So essentially that it's, people have agreed to do this, and the relationships could be in various ways, emotional, romantic, and sexual. What makes it ethical? Like, how is that ethical, right? Because everything society tells us is that's not okay. A lot of things society tells us is that's not okay. But what makes this ethical and different than the unethical versions is that with ethical non-monogamy or consensual, you are completely open about it. So everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows that, this person has this partner and this other partner. It's not hush-hush. It's not secret. It's all out in the open. There's often a lot of communication about this. And not only is everything open, but everybody is consenting. So that's a common misconception. People think, oh, you just agree to this because your partner wanted to do this, but you don't actually want to do this, right? So the idea that you didn't fully enthusiastically say yes to this. But what makes it ethical and consensual is that everybody did enthusiastically consent. So people didn't just do it, half-heartedly, like, oh, I'm doing this just because my partner wants to. But people go into it with their eyes open, and true ethical non-monogamy is that people are fully consenting to it. It does not the same let's talk about what also it's not. It's not the same as infidelity or adultery, because with those things, there's lies involved. There's dishonesty. Within the context of those relationships, those are set up as monogamous relationships. And so that's the norm of that relationship. And when somebody breaks that, that is breaking the rules of that relationship, the constraints of that relationship. So that's not the same thing as ethical non-monogamy, because at ethical non-monogamy, everybody's talking, everything's out in the open. With ethical non-monogamy, the rules are not defined for you. So you really have to negotiate what your boundaries are, what your are maybe comfortable with those kinds of relationships or certain kinds of time commitments, and others might be not comfortable. So it's something that really involves a lot of communication and a lot of self-reflection to really just understand what your own boundaries are, which is a really important process, whether you're in an ethically non-monogamous situation or not, to understand what your own sense of boundaries are and to be aware of them and then to communicate them with other people. But in ethically non-monogamous situations, that becomes even more important because you are chartering this new territory that maybe you haven't learned from your parents. So you're figuring out these new guidelines and rules and what applies to you. So what about, why is this important? How many people actually engage in this? Well, one study that's been done on the prevalence is that over 20%, so over 1 in 5 Americans have reported being in a consensually non-monogamous relationship at some point in their lives. So not necessarily did they say, I'm like this for life, but at some point in their lives, they reported being in a consensually non-monogamous relationship. So continuing along with terms, one of the most common types of ethical non-monogamy, because ethical non-monogamy is actually what we call an umbrella term. So what that means is it's like an overarching category, and then there's different kinds of relationships that fit into that. So for example, swingers, where people have casual relationships with casual sexual relationships, often with other people, is one type. But one really common type, especially one really common that I see in therapy of ethical non-monogamy, is what's called polyamory. And polyamory is a very common type of ethical non-monogamy, and there's a lot of resources out there about polyamory. And polyamory often involves long-term relationships that are emotionally intimate. So often, like what characterizes polyamory from, let's say, swinging, another form of ethical non-monogamy, is that with swinging, the focus is more on casual sexual relationships, but with polyamory, the focus is more on emotionally intimate. So all of these are just different types of ethical non-monogamy, but polyamory is what we're focusing on at the moment. Another key aspect of polyamory is that it's fairly feminist in the sense that it's trying to kind of equalize power differences. So a lot of times, especially within couples that are male-female, there's often a power difference where the male has more power than the woman. And even in societies where there is a permission to have different partners, like often only men are allowed to have more partners. But with polyamory, there's this idea that all genders have access to additional partners. So it's whether you're non-binary, whether you're a woman, regardless, you will have equal access to additional partners. And another thing linked with polyamory is that it's linked with honesty and open communication, and this idea of not being possessive, that nobody really owns your body. Egalitarianism, which is this idea of equal power dynamics, like one person's not, or there's not one person holding power over others. And also there's often polyamory communities. So Inland Empire has a polyamory community. There's one in LA. There's different polyamory communities, both virtual and in person. So polyamory can vary by different things. So it can vary based on the priority and or label that you have for relationships. So some people that are polyamorous might say, I have a secondary partner and I have a primary partner. And so they have this hierarchy when it comes to their relationships, versus someone that's more solo polyamory, which means that they might not have as much importance placed on different relationships, or someone that has relationship anarchy, in which they don't really have a sense of priority across their different relationships. Polyamory could also vary by how people are connected. So for example, that if you see in the diagram, that first one on the left is like an upside down V. That's often called a V configuration. You have one person and they're dating two different people. The second one is what's called a triad or throuple, and that's when all three are dating. So polyamory can vary by how people are connected. It can vary based on how people define it for themselves. So maybe some people consider it like a sexual orientation almost, or relationship orientation, like similar to being lesbian, gay, or bisexual. Some people might consider it to be a practice, like something that they're practicing in the moment, but maybe not part of who they are. And some might see it as an identity for themselves. And so it's more like something that characterizes who they are and is consistent with how they see the world. And then another way that polyamory can vary is based on how our partners connected. So parallel polyamory is when partners don't know each other, don't really meet. Kitchen table is when partners can hang out together and they can be comfortable together. And then lap sitting is on the other end of the spectrum, where people are expected to be really good friends or lovers. So there's more of this expectation put there. And then just to give a little bit of the research, so polyamorous people, when they've looked at people who do have that primary versus secondary, with their primary partners, there's less stigma, so more acceptance from society, more investment, greater satisfaction, greater commitment, and more communication. And then with secondary, there's more time spent on sexual activity. And then also compared to their monogamous peers, polyamorous people have reported greater intimacy, as well as satisfaction, commitment, trust, and passionate love. So, so lots of benefits in that study. And then for people that were specifically polyamorous and bisexual, themes that came out of this qualitative study were love, intimacy, and friendship. And some of the benefits to the individual is that even though it's very challenging to confront ourselves, it's also very rewarding, and often we can unlearn things that we have thought we kind of took for granted, and so that can be very rewarding to kind of create our own path. And then ultimately, it allows us to let go of control and face emotions that might be uncomfortable for us and be more authentic with ourselves and more authentic with others as well. So this idea of benefiting the person really is captured in this quote. I came into polyamory to become more intimate with other people, and I ended up becoming more intimate with myself. So that's a common experience. And then it also benefits the relationship in the sense that there's greater social support, you know, because you have your partners, different partners, and then your partner's partners. So people often call it like a polycule, like your polyamorous family. The fact that you define your own relationship rules often gives people some agency over their relationship, a sense of ownership, and also helps with communication. So you have to really communicate so you can negotiate those rules. And so also people can feel very liberated from the roles that they've been given. As I mentioned with gender, you know, people can feel very liberated, you know, women, non-binary people who weren't allowed to have different partners. And people can feel a greater sense of agency over their body as well. Also, there could be less pressure to satisfy every need that your partner has. People feel more flexible in relationships and a greater, and also what's called compersion, which is when you feel pure joy that your partner's happy, kind of like the opposite of jealousy, essentially, that you feel really happy that your partner's with someone because they're happy. And then also relationship wise, they can be more balanced in terms of power dynamics, so more egalitarian. So I want to just close with some resources. All of these resources here, there's an American Psychological Association Division 44 task force on consensual non-monogamy. So that's an important resource within psychology. And then there was a CBSN special here. All of these resources you can find in a resource document that I created. And so that's the link right here on this page. But I know it's a very long, messy link, so please email me if you would like the resource document. I'm happy to email it to you. So you can email me at mbadiee@csusp.edu. And also email me, please, if you have any questions or comments. I'm very open to feedback and very happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your time and have a wonderful day.